everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm here with your extra show for the week, and joining me from the other side of the world, and frankly, I'm incredibly jealous of him to be as far away from Ibrox as I could possibly think of, is my very good friend, Mr. Rob Shorthouse. Rob, thank you very much for coming on.
Cammy, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Sadly, it's not much of a pleasure to speak about Rangers anymore. And even though I'm however many thousands of kilometres away, sadly, I'm still members of lots of WhatsApp groups, and it has been absolutely torture for the past, 12 hours? Murder. Apologies in advance to anybody that's listening to this, but I don't think either you or I are in the best of moods, but we will do what we can to try and make sense of last night's absolute car crash and where that puts us. So yeah, we are where we are, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I have zero doubt there'll be plenty of people listening to this who will be revelling in the absolute bin fire that Rangers are at the moment. However, more importantly, there will be people who are listening to this who are they're like us, Rob, they're looking for answers. And we'll jump into it because I think, you mentioned we're recording about 12 hours after the final whistle at Pittodrie. If my mood has changed, it's probably just become more accepting now of. I'm probably going through that, the process. And at first it was anger. Maybe now I'm in acceptance. I've got no idea. But I think more than anything else, I'm just staggered at how we got here. Last night, the final whistle, as always, you are immediately reactive. We did our post-match show that we always do on our Patreon site last night, myself and David and Colin. And we were angry, and there is no doubt around that. I think everybody who watched that calamitous performance at Pittodrie was angry. Now, upon reflection, I'm probably just in a stage of I'm lost. I need a way out of this hole that we've managed to get into. And I think for me, Rob, the thing that's probably really come home to me, and I talked about this really briefly on the post-match show, was after the FCSB win, which was a good win and a good performance. I said, okay, but what about Aberdeen? And after the terrible performance but good result against St Mirren, I said, okay, but what about Aberdeen? And the niggling feeling in the back of my head was always around the struggle that Philippe Clement has when he comes up against a major test. And it probably, upon reflection, now made me worry about how much I put Aberdeen into account. I've had a great start to the season. There's no denying that. League tables don't lie. But it's probably just showed me the lack of confidence I have in this manager and this team. And ultimately, I was proven right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose I should start off by sort of making clear that I've completely, like I'm sure so many other people have, and Davey and yourself and Colin articulated it well last night, I thought, on the post-match on the Patreon site. We've just lost confidence in this guy. You can't look ahead to any kind of big game and feel that he will come up with something that will take us through it. He's never ever been able to do that. Any big test that he's ever really faced. I know he's won a League Cup, and I think you said last night on the post match that would he have won it if it was Celtic we were playing, and that's a very good point. But over the course of the time that he's been here, he's never faced down a challenge. I think he is making the team worse, not better. And some of these decisions are baffling and all this kind of stuff. And look, you can talk about individual players, and I'm sure we're going to, the extraordinary decision to continue with Tav, the extraordinary decision to continue with Dessers, just the way that everything is set up. But structurally, the club is just in such a bad place, from top to bottom. And we've got a manager that somehow has had his contract extended. And he is definitely not part of the solution. He's very much part of the problem. And I think that is why we all feel the way that we do. We've been in funks before, Cammy. You and I are probably around about the same vintage. We've seen it. My early memories of Rangers are back in the 80s before Souness, and I know just how bad that was. but this feels as bleak as it's done for a very, very long time, and it's not just because Dessers can't hit, a barn door with, or whatever that, a cow's arse with a banjo, or whatever the hell that phrase you want to use is. It's deeper than that. The malaise that's set in is because of everything that's going wrong, and we can all see it from recruitment, from the lack of direction, from the executive team, from the boardroom, everything that just seems wrong at the moment. And it's been a long, long time since it's felt this bad. So when a result like last night comes along, yes, we're angry, but that's not what I would guess that a lot of the people who will be listening to this podcast will be feeling. I think they'll be feeling, something close to misery, because it just feels that we're in such a deep, deep hole, and there's no obvious way out of it. Sacking the manager may help, but we've done that for the past couple of seasons, and it's certainly not contributed to any forward momentum. So I think you're not alone, Cammy. I certainly feel it as well. It's anger after the game, but this is not just anger about a performance. This is a real worry about the state of the club at the moment. And as I say, I think it's something that will be felt by a lot of people.
I mean, the club produced its annual report on Tuesday, Rob, and I think the reaction was certainly varied. There's positives in there in terms of commercial costs, but the glaring error, in terms of what's happened is not new news. Okay, is the best way I can put it, because we knew in the build up to the summer, the message out of the club and from the manager was we need to reduce player wages, and player trading is non-existent. We said well before the summer, a player trading model of being able to buy in a younger player and then ultimately flip them for a profit once you've developed them is the game plan. That simply hasn't been executed for a number of reasons, which I won't bore the listeners by going into detail on. So there's an element of that. Once you see the figures in the cold light of day, and our friends across the city who are obviously all professional tax accountants and professional auditors, happy to be able to rip all that apart and show as to how bleak that message is. The challenge that I think we have at the moment, and you're right, because we need to talk about the manager, we need to talk about players who are just simply not turning up for these challenges. We'll do that in just a moment. But the challenge for me just now is we don't have ready funds available that isn't going to have to take, more investment from somewhere, whether or not it's one of the existing shareholders or whether or not someone new comes in with an injection of cash, which allows us to be able to right the ship. We will have to see what happens. The problem for me more than anything else is no one's making those decisions. We have said for too long now that the board have been too involved in footballing decisions, and yet here we are back at square one, where the key footballing decision should be now we have to relieve the manager of his duties. And the biggest problem when I was watching that game last night for me was, we saw the game against St Mirren, and Cyril Dessers comes on. He was benched. Everyone was asking for Eagleman to get a start. I'm not here to shit on Hamza Eagleman, by the way. I think that there could be something there. I don't think he's been given enough time to be able to produce it yet, so we'll have to stick a pin in him. Dessers comes on, makes a game-changing piece of play to set up Lavlav Cherny. We win the game. Dessers is on a high, confidence-wise. He gets a start against Aberdeen, and his performance last night was abject to the extreme. And the reason as to why I just pick on him in that particular instance is because it's almost, to me, the feeling is all of your confidence building, all of your, positive vibes, if I wanted to be able to bring the kids into the conversation, seems to dissipate the minute that we're brought up against a harder level opponent. That's an atmosphere, that's a culture, that's a huge problem as far as I'm concerned.
It is. I mean, there's no two ways about it, Cammy. That is actually the challenge that faces us. It's a challenge of leadership. both in terms of the management and the way that the team's set up. And you're right, we should talk about it, because it is extraordinary the way that we fold, because our players are not that bad, but they are disorganized and they have no confidence, and apply pressure and they completely fall apart. And you have to ask why that is the case, because that's down to leadership and the culture of the club that you're talking about. But I suppose there's that sort of wider issue about leadership, and I declare an interest. I know, because they're based out in Hong Kong. I know a few of the people who are investing in the club, and they have invested huge amounts of cash. And when we are being critical about the individuals on the board, I'm always really, really mindful about the fact that without them, then we wouldn't be spending money. And the argument's not, to my mind, about spending money. It's about how we're spending money, because they have done a great job to transform the commercial revenues. They have been very clear that they need to bring the wage bill down, and by God they did, because our wage bill was horrendous, and is still. But and they have made funds available to the managers, but the decisions that have been taken in terms of how we have spent that money have consistently failed. Over the course of however many years that is now, we have not done well when it comes to the decisions that have a financial implication for the club. So, we just need to be better than that, and it needs to be part of a structured plan. And the reason that I say that is because if you're going to appoint a manager and you're going to say, right, we're going to back this guy and we're going to give him a new contract and we're going to really stick behind him, you need to be able to trust him that he has got a very, very clear vision about what it is he's trying to do and how he's trying to do it. And if you have that trust, then you back him with money. Now, there is no evidence whatsoever that Phil Clement has a clear idea about what he wants to do and how he wants to do it, but yet we still continue to give this guy money, and he continues to buy players, and then he continues to take them backwards, and there is no clear strategy or ethos in the club. So it's a kind of vicious circle that we'll continue to back guys that don't know, that don't get us, they don't understand what they need to do in terms of players in our team, and we give them money, and then we end up with financial results, and then we need the investors to put more money in. And then those investors, because it's their cash, want to be more involved, and it's just a vicious circle. We need, I think, to take a step back, and we've been speaking about it today, Cammy, on our group chats, which I'm sure many of the listeners have been as well. We all we really want, I suppose, is clear evidence that there is a plan. Now, whether or not we as fans have patience if somebody was to come out and say it's a 3 or a 5 year plan is another matter. But at the minute, there doesn't seem to be a plan. There's a lot of money getting spent. It doesn't seem to be getting spent wisely. We do not appear to be going forwards. And that, I think, to our earlier point, is why we feel so bloody miserable at the moment. Because if we were working towards something, then I would have a bit of patience. But we're not working towards. We're walking backwards, and it's just dreadful to see, to be honest with you.
I mean, I suppose that's adding into my frustration, because I would love to know what was said and done in order to be able to justify that contract extension for the manager. Because to me, I understand that there is a squad of players that he inherited, and a number of them love a new manager coming in and getting a dead cat bounce, and then it tapers off. And now I think it's pretty clear that all that simply happened when Clement came in was we got said dead cat bounce, but then it was just prolonged, and then it fell off a cliff. And so, yeah, maybe we'd be sitting here saying, well, if we had lost the league in the final day after an incredible resurgence, and he was able to show there was proof in the pudding that he was able to see those improvements, then fantastic. But also we had to have a clear out. There was no way around that. We did do that. There's that's plain to see. We broke up the leadership group, and we now seem to have instituted one that is if it's almost as bad, if not worse, because we can't go on that sustained run of form. You can tell been at the games, I'm sure you can as well, when you see it on the TVs and stuff as well, that there's zero positivity in the player body language at the moment. There's a lack of accountability, and there's just a general feeling to now, certainly that you can see on the pitch, that no one wants to take the responsibility to step up and say it. Now, you mentioned, the Rangers teams that you and I grew up with and were very, very fond of. Those teams were replete with players throughout generations and changes within those teams that you did have players who said, I'm going to take the responsibility here. Give me the ball. We are going to move together as a unit. Now, I don't think Aberdeen are a great team. I don't think that they're going to maintain their form. I think it will start to, fall off a cliff. And I do think we'll finish at least second, right? I'm going to try and remain positive as best I can. Maybe people will be laughing in the background. I understand why. What it will take for that at the moment, because we need to be able to inject some belief within this team, is it will take changes at the top, because I don't think the manager is going to continue this diatribe of, we were unlucky against Aberdeen, we could beat them in another day, blah, blah. There's an element of this where I think Rangers fans are just, they don't believe it any longer, and I don't believe the players have believed in it for a little while now. And there just seems to be no one who wants to be able to take that responsibility within the playing staff. And that's the thing that I think more than anything else really genuinely grates me, because we've got fans who follow this club around the world. We had guys who went up to Aberdeen last night, probably took half days from work, travelled far and wide, and then they've got to travel the business end of 3 hours to get back to Glasgow, and the manager comes out and says, I felt we were unlucky. Aberdeen could have won that game last night, Rob, by at least 2 or 3 goals. A penalty save by Jack Butland and 2 other good saves from him. And yet it was a defensive calamity again that cost us the 3 points, continues Aberdeen's momentum, and everyone's just sat in the dressing room, I'm sure, just looking at each other going, okay, what's next?
Yeah, but I mean, it's so obvious, right? When you're looking at the team, these are completely self-evident things that you're saying, Cammy. There is no confidence, there is no shape, there is no organisation, there is nobody taking charge. All of these things don't require a UEFA Pro license to figure out. Do you know what I mean? It's the fact that, what's that phrase about? The definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and that's where we are. We have seen this movie so many times from this manager that, the baffling decisions, the starting lineup that people are sort of scratching their head going, what's going on here? Players benched when it doesn't seem to make any sense. Signings that he spent a lot of money on, not being trusted for big games. There's just so many things that are so obvious that everybody can see. And so when you come to a game like Aberdeen last night, where they're doing well, they're well organised, they're well coached, they clearly have trust in their manager, the players, you just know how it's going to end up. So all of us, I'm sure, were looking at that Aberdeen fixture with sort of dread almost, that, that's the inevitable will happen. We will go there and we will get beat. The question is, if these things are self-evident, why is nothing being done about it? What is happening at the training ground? Why is there not some sort of sense of, right, what is happening is not working. We have a system that is dependent on pacey wingers and we don't have them, so let's change the system. Nothing is changing, and that contributes, I think, as I was saying, the fact that we're not daft. We can look at these things. We can look at the club and, the gaps at the top, the decisions that have been taken, the poor investments, all that kind of stuff. And then we can look at what's happening on the pitch and we can see for ourselves that it's not right. And something has to change. Now, that's easy for us to say because we are just 2 guys on a podcast talking about it. But you just cannot continue doing what we are doing, both on the park and the way that the team is playing and the way the club is being run. There's just everything at the moment is not right. And that is why, it is so bleak. because it's not just about getting beat off Aberdeen, it's the whole collection of everything that's going on at the moment. And it's, yeah, I mean, as I say, we're fortunate in the sense that we're just fans who have an opinion, but we're also less fortunate in the sense that we've got to watch it, and we know that things are, as I say, in a really poor way. And unless there's change, unless there's decisive change, unless we see something different, then I don't know. I think the way that we're feeling at the moment will very, very quickly turn to apathy, and you will see what we're seeing at the weekend, where there's tickets available for a cup semi-final. I think you'll see that happen more and more and more, and that's the most dangerous thing for the club, because it's been the fans that have put tons of cash in, but have also driven the team on when they needed it over the past few years. And if the fans aren't there, then that really, really does become problematic.
Yeah, I mean, there was still tickets available for the Steaua game on the day. As you rightly say, there's still tickets available for the semi-final on Sunday. We will talk about that shortly, but I also, now have friends who have got tickets already for Sunday, and they're like that. I'm sacking off. I cannot be bothered. And I suppose just to continue to twist the knife even further, I genuinely believe we'll win on Sunday. But this is the problem, because we're kicking the can down the road where, and I'm not being glib, by the way, about, being able to beat Motherwell and get to a League Cup final, because I've got no right to do that. Rangers have not been blessed with trophies that we, in the recent history, where we can turn around and say, well, it's easy for us to be able to forgo it. We can't do that, right? But the League Cup's a microcosm of what I'd said before, where you probably come up against an opponent that you feel, I think we'll be able to get a result against them. The players doubtlessly will feel the same, but it's the final. Because let's face it, nobody's putting a mortgage on us being able to beat either Aberdeen or Celtic if we get to the League Cup final. So you have a stepping stone at the moment that doesn't feel like an achievement. It just feels like you're ticking another game off the list, but you're still waiting for the inevitable. So I think that's the challenge that we need to be able to try and get to. But I suppose really, and this is, the kind of key question, for those changes to come about, and let's be realistic, okay, because I know that there's been various conversations about, we need to get rid of the manager, the counter argument being, well, we don't have the operating cash to be able to do that. We need to be able to see players take responsibility. Do we go top down and say that the responsibility now absolutely has to fall on the board to be able to say yes, to generate the revenue to get rid of the manager? Because I don't believe for a single minute he's going to consider resigning. Nor should he, by the way. That's not a criticism, although I have many of Philippe Clement. You and I wouldn't be doing that if you were sitting in a stage where you said, if this continues to go down this road, ultimately I'm getting a payout. Why should I leave voluntarily? Or does it come from, and it maybe has to just be the players getting together in a room and just saying, what are we going to do about this? Because you mentioned earlier on this, the systems and the tactics are not working. Yeah, put that at the manager's door. You're absolutely right. But what I saw last night, and there was certainly elements of it against St Mirren, was just a huge, slackness in us being able to take care of the ball properly. We passed it into areas that just simply had no idea what we were doing. Players couldn't tell who was moving where. And I hate to bring it that old cliche, but it genuinely did look like as if they had just met. I've played in plenty of games of football with guys that you don't know, and part of being able to play in those games is trying to read what other players are doing, and you have to do that in the game to be able to understand what's going on. But I also didn't get the benefit of training with these players every single day of the week to be able to come across, that learning and being able to talk about the strategy and to talk about where we need to be able to see players improving on their skills, and whether or not that's taking the ball at close quarters, finishing, being able to read the movement and being able to actually say, right, if you stand there, move there, then I know where I'm going to be playing the ball. Even that is the most basic of things. And I would like to think that the players are now getting to such a stage of frustration that someone somewhere within that playing group, anyone, because it can now be anyone, just simply turns around and says, we have got to be able to get better at what we are doing on the park. You can play whatever formation and strategy and lineup and, with the ball, without the ball, as much as you want. But if we are simply playing blind passes, if we are not making enough movement, if we are not applying ourselves properly, Pep Guardiola couldn't come in and introduce a system that's going to work.
I sort of agree with that. So look, there is no doubt whatsoever that a load of players have completely chucked it and are of the view that the manager's a dead man walking, and psychologically that's had an impact on them, and they've completely chucked it, and they're looking for ways to hide in games as opposed to step forward. Totally agree. Again, going back to this point about things being self-evident, you watch the games, you can see that. You saw it last night. You saw it with Dessers. You see it with a bunch of our players. I guess the counter to that is that if you're and these are professional footballers, by the way, so like the basic things that they should be able to do, they should be able to do. So in that, I completely agree with you. But I suppose, look, if you are, if you're one of our midfielders, or you're actually anybody in our team, and you know that the ball is going forward to somebody that can do nothing with it, and that is basically our system at the moment, is get the ball forward to Dessers. Dessers makes an arse of it, and the ball comes back quickly at us. Why are you passing to this guy? The whole thing falls apart because the players will know that all you're doing is inviting the opposition back onto us because you're putting the ball forward to somebody that cannot hold on to it.
But if you, and sorry to cut in, Rob, but if you play that ball forward and then you then go and run and support them, I think the player then turns around and goes, I'm not going to bother running, because the minute I play the ball forward to him and he doesn't hold on to it and it comes back the way, now all of a sudden I'm out of position.
100. That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point, Cammy. And it's been rinse and repeat of that since February or March. That's exactly where we've gone wrong. Is we've just been caught with the ball coming back at us when we were facing towards the opposition goal, and it's put us in all sorts of bother. We've seen it so many times over the course of 8 months since the wheels started to come off. So the reason I say I sort of agree with what you're saying is it is down to the manager to make some changes. There is no point continuing to play with Tavernier. There is no point continuing to play with Dessers. I don't understand why we've got Bajrami out on the left wing. The system is not working, and the players are not stupid. They know this. So he has to make a change, even a symbolic one, and just say we're going to tweak, or we're going to drop Dessers. We're going to play lovely. I don't know what. I'm not qualified. I'm not a football coach. I don't work with these players every single day. But what is clear is what is going on at the minute is not working, and in order for there to be a change has to be made. It's not going to happen by itself. I don't think for 1 second that there's going to be a sort of Barry, because there's nobody there to do it. There's no Barry Ferguson or somebody within that group of players that's going to get them all in a room and knock 7 bells out of them. It will not happen by osmosis. It will not happen by itself. A change has to happen. Now, if the manager's going to stay, and you've got to imagine that he will do, because he's on an extended contract and we don't have the cash to pay him off. If he's going to stay, he has to change it, because it's the only option he's got. Because continuing to do what we're doing and then coming out and speaking an absolute load of tosh in the press conferences afterwards is utterly hopeless. And he must see that. He must know that. He's not a stupid man. He must know that what's going on at the minute is not working. So he has to change it. I don't think the players will change it themselves. He has to signal change, and the obvious ones are the 2 players that I mentioned. Tav is gone. Davey was talking about it last night on the post match. His defensive frailties over the years have been more than compensated by his attacking abilities. The attacking abilities are gone. He's not scoring goals anymore. He's not driving us forward in the way that he did, and he's done. As far as I'm concerned, and as a leader of the team, that's always been suspect in my view, and so it's not working. So Tav is dragging the players down. Dessers, again, as we were speaking about there, he is leading to problems for the team because of his inability to hold things up and finish chances. Because when the ball goes forward, he doesn't hold it up. Players are moving forward and we're caught, and it allows teams like Aberdeen to do what they did last night, which is just to dance down our right-hand side, we have our usual Rangers nonsense at the back. They score, game over. So it has to change, Cammy, and he has to drive it. If he's going to stay, if we can't afford to pay him off, he has to make a change, because this cannot continue. This cannot continue like this.
Do you think he's got the humility to be able to do that? And what I mean by that, Rob, is because, again, I've said this before, he's wedded to that system. He has, to cause and effect, tried to pull the wool over our eyes and almost treat us, as if we're a little bit daft by going back to, players are just in the building. It takes time to settle. Robin Proper had to come in, despite the fact he'd played pre-season qualifiers for his previous club, but he takes time to settle because he has to come in and acclimatise to a new country. Now, whilst these things to a degree are valid, I don't think Rangers fans accept it when you get to Halloween, that some players are still settling in and blah blah blah, what have you. We'll see the best Rangers team in October, November. It's getting worse, if anything. Do you think he's got the self-awareness to firstly come out and say, it's not working, I acknowledge it's not working, and I need to change it? And to a certain extent, even if he does a mea culpa and he does say, look, I've tried something, it hasn't worked, however, I want to have the opportunity to change it. And as bizarre as this might sound, I actually think that there's some among us who would say, do you know what, that's refreshing, because it's a change of policy to say, yeah, do you know what, I'll hold my hands up, I've not got it. I struggle to think he has got that in him. I think now he's living and dying by a system, and he will, ultimately pay the price for it. But again, I don't think, and by the way, I mean this in all honesty, I do not think Philippe Clement is engineering a payout. I genuinely don't, right? I don't believe that's who he is. I do believe, however, he's so incredibly stubborn, and he does the right thing that football managers do of protecting his players publicly. I understand that. But it's clear from everything that we've just spoken about and the evidence in front of our eyes over a number of games now that he's not having those behind-the-scenes conversations with the players. Or if he is, they're not listening, which is, I don't know which is worse. I honestly don't feel he's got the ability now to come out and stand by what he said before. He said it after Lyon when he was asked about it in the post-match presser. Can you consider doing this? Would you consider moving the team around? Would you consider changing it? Because I think it shows, in his eyes, I had it wrong from the start. So now he's just dying on that hill.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, Cameron, because if he continues doing what he's doing, then it's only going to go one way, which is south. In terms of league table, cups, you name it, because it's, as we have discussed ad nauseum for the last half hour, it's not working. So does he have the ability to change it? Does he have the desire to change it? If he wants to keep his job, he's just got to. He's just got to do it. I don't know. We don't know him. We can only go with the evidence that's been presented. When he does speak publicly, he is quite a stubborn chap, but he's also not stupid. And if you are faced with a situation where everything that you're doing and have been doing is not working, then of course you're going to change it. That's the whole point about being a leader. And in all honesty, I just don't know if he will, but I know that he must. For the reasons that we've been speaking about, and the reasons that every Rangers fan will have been talking about since last night and this morning, and they're working on their WhatsApp groups, because it can't go on like this. And if he does make a change, and if he does say, right, okay, we're going to start playing a couple of the younger players, Lovelace is going to get run, whatever the change is. In some respects, it doesn't really matter at this point, but whatever the change is, I'm like you. And maybe you and I are not typical in that regard, Cammy. But see if somebody stands up and says, right, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to and gives you evidence of a clear plan, I'd give the guy a chance. It's the same, when it comes to the club. If somebody was to stand up and say, right, here is the plan, here's what we're going to do, like we did when Gerrard came in. There's a three-year plan here. I would give that person patience. I would give. I would allow the time. The counter to that, of course, is that Rangers fans are utterly impatient. We're so used to success that we wouldn't be able to, give somebody time and all that kind of stuff. And I can see that. I'm not sure I agree with it. I think we are so desperate for something different because we've had the same old garbage for far too long now. That actually a manager that says, right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to invest in young players and we're going to plan for some type of future. I think that person would get time. And likewise, I say, if it was done at a club level as well, of here's what we're trying to do, and it's going to take 3 years, could be completely wrong, and there could be a lot of people screaming at their computers, phones, and everything else at the moment, saying that's just absolute nonsense. But as I keep on saying, and I'm sounding like a broken record, we cannot continue doing what we're doing because it is not working, and it has not worked for years. And if we keep on doing it, it will continue to not work. And yeah, that's where we find ourselves, my friend.
So let's wave the magic wand and let's go on the assumption that we did have a board structure that was able to invoke that change. Are you of the school that we bring in an interim manager now until the end of the season to be able to try and right the ship, and then spend that time between now and then to recruit a qualified permanent replacement? Or is it a case of we now need to give someone the permanent job now, if Philippe Clement goes, obviously, to then say you've got the rest, the season's a write-off. You've got 6 months, at least one window, to be able to get it turned around as best we can, finish second. And by the way, that's, again, not an offhand remark, because if the accounts that were published on Tuesday tell us anything, that we need to see where we can do better within European qualification, because Kiev was a huge, huge loss to us on that sheet. Or is it just a case of being able to bring in probably someone, I'm going to be honest, because I know that I've heard names bandied about, Stephen Davis, Kevin Thompson, etc. People who, I suppose, in the nicest way possible, I would feel comfortable getting those players in a room and knocking 7 bells out of them, and instilling that belief and that confidence within the squad. Because as bizarre as this might sound, I actually do think that we have talent within that squad. We have passengers, an absolute dead weight as well. And those guys, if they did come in with a view of saying, look, you're here until the beginning of June, so whatever changes you make, they're yours to make. But ultimately, the best thing you can do is being able to keep a sinking ship afloat. You can drop James Tavernier. You have got license to, if you needed to, get Dessers out of that squad and potentially out of the club in January. Give guys like Zach Lovelace a chance. Where would you like to see us go next?
Well, I mean, I think again we can only go by what's happened in the past, and we have made changes mid-year when we sacked Gio, when we sacked Beale, and we're now facing the same situation here. David Edgar talks eloquently about this, about why it doesn't work, and I tend to agree with that. I think sort of emptying the management structure mid-season and then bringing somebody else in only leads us, based on past evidence, to what we've seen with Clement, which is you get a bounce. We got it under Beale, and then we go into the following season with expectations that perhaps are unrealistic or don't match up with the ability of the guy that we've appointed mid-season, and it all goes wrong. And as I say, that's the cycle we're in, Cammy. That is what we're currently experiencing. So I don't think that we, in the same way that I don't think Philippe Clement should be continuing to do what he's doing, I don't think the club should continue to do what it's doing either. If they do make the decision that it's gone too far and they've got to get rid of the guy, and somebody's willing to stump up the cash to make it happen, then bring in somebody that, again, I'm not a football coach. I don't have my badges. I don't have a pro license. But you look at that squad, and they should be better than they are. And if they had even just a basic sense of organisation, structure, and ethos, and style of play, and all that kind of stuff, then they would be doing better than they are at the moment. So I would be very much in the camp, if a change is made, that you put somebody in temporarily, and then you get everything else sorted. You get a chief executive in, you get a director of football in, you sort the structure. You give yourself a bit of time to do that. You give yourself 6-7 months to make all those key appointments, and then you bring in a manager and you go again from the start of next season. There's no point making changes um, uh, uh, in the middle of the season, and when we don't have when we've got so many gaps at all levels of the club, Cammy. I think let's take our time. Let's get it sorted. If we are going to make a change, then do it right, and bring in a permanent manager next season. But that being said, the elephant in the room is, this guy's just got a new contract on extended terms and on extended years, so he will not be cheap to get rid of. And as our accounts show, we are not awash with cash, so it's very, very difficult to see financially how we get rid of this guy, which is why I guess my plea is that if he's staying, there needs to be change, because it cannot continue.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the obvious benefit to your point there is that if we are able to do a degree of transition across that, and we are able to recruit a CEO front of the queue, and very much top of that person's list would be the recruitment of a new manager, and that decision has to be right. And we have seen a number of seasons as to where we think that we've been able to bring in someone, but fundamentally it's been a stopgap as well. Let's try and put Aberdeen and some of these woes behind us, Rob, as we talk about this weekend's Scottish League Cup semi-final. I'm jumping ahead to the Scottish Cup semi-final. Christ, I'll be delighted if we're able to get to there. But League Cup semi-final at Hampden against Motherwell Sunday afternoon. As I said already, I think that we should be able to see our way through to the final. What's your thoughts in terms of the response that you would like to be able to see from Rangers, given we've got we'll have a recovery day today, do some training on Friday, probably some light training on Saturday. We've talked about all the conversations and changes that have to happen. It's too short a time frame, in my opinion, for that to go on. I think we need to be able to go out and put on enough of a display against Motherwell before we then start really kind of getting under the hood about some of the kind of larger problems. But I am hoping, and again, I do appreciate that people would they may have some degree of excitement for going to Hampden, might be taking their kids to the first League Cup semi-final, and fair play to them, poor wee bastards. But I just want as routine a performance as we possibly can. I don't need to be blown away at the moment by swashbuckling, rampaging, running up and down the wings. I just need to see us be able to try and get through, because at this point in time we are absolutely entrenched in one game at a time.
Yeah, well, look, even in the best of times, a semi-final was just one of those must-win games. Even during the era that we grew up with, Cammy, a semi-final was just something that it was exactly as you say. We're not looking for sort of 1963 Real Madrid. We're looking for just get us over the line, get us into the final, because it's all about the trophies. So yeah, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, at this stage. We've just got to win, because I think if we don't win on Sunday, then the pressure on the decision makers at the club to take immediate action will just become unbearable. So Clement must, it goes back to what I was saying, Clement must know this. He must know that he is, he's certainly not got his coat on, but or been handed his hat, but it's not that far away. So he'll know that he's got to win, and I just hope to hell he does. At this stage, do I have the same level of confidence that you have that we're going to go out there and win? No. I think Motherwell will be looking at it and saying this is a brilliant time to play Rangers, because they are fairly shambolic and they're easy to get at, and the defence is all over the shop. So I don't have as much confidence, but it's Rangers and it's a semi-final and we should win. So I hope to hell that we do.
If he doesn't, is that the final nail in the coffin?
It's just, I mean, it's hard to see how he's surviving at the moment. But if we get binned out the League Cup at Hampden on Sunday, then it will be, the clamour for the guy's head would just be, I think, irresistible in terms of what needs to happen. So yeah, I think it's must win.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it is absolutely must win. You're absolutely right about that. And again, I go back to that point. We're not in a position where we can be glib about our chances about winning domestic silverware. And the thing I think for me, and listen, you and I have lived through these periods, that behaviourally Rangers fans vote with their feet. We've discussed that already in terms of the still tickets available for it. The atmosphere around the support at the moment, as I say, is fairly low. But I think a defeat on Sunday moves it into real toxic territory. I think you will see protests at Ibrox. I think that you'll see more and more. I understand, there's been banners and messages at games, etc., related to the board. I think it gets really ugly really quickly. And again, I know that I'm bringing that up just now as well, and it's absolutely a scenario I want to avoid. However, I just think that it goes back to anger, and it's a sustained anger, and you and I have seen that before.
Yeah, we have, and as I say, I agree with you, to be honest with you, because I just think it will be the final nail, the final straw. People will go completely crackers if we get beaten on Sunday, because it will be the chance of silverware. It will be the sort of compound interest on top of everything else that's happened this season. The getting absolutely gubbed at Parkhead. The worst performance I think I can remember for the past 20 years at Rugby Park. That nonsense last night. The Champions League qualification. The signings, the injuries, everything that's been going on. I think it will come to a head if we get beat on Sunday. So he must know this. He must know this, that he's got to do it absolutely whatever it takes to get the win on Sunday. And if that is dropping Dessers, if it is dropping Tav, if it's changing the system, going 3 at the back, whatever the hell it is, he needs to make sure that he does it, because it is unthinkable that we get put out on Sunday.
Well, that's back to him. It's back to the players. I'm going to use the word that I used in the build-up to Aberdeen, Rob, that it's an opportunity. No one listening to this, by the way, wants this malaise to continue. Well, maybe some people listen to it, but the vast majority of people listening to this do not want this malaise to continue. They want to be able to try and see improvements. And I try to remain optimistic. I try to remain positive in my general outlook of life, despite what Rangers try to do to sabotage that. But for me, I go back to that terminology. The players have to see this as a chance to be able to get back on the horse. If we're able to build confidence with it, and as we've already discussed, that confidence can be sustained after the game, then okay, that's really what we have to do. But they have to be able to try and get the fans back on side. And if the manager does need to be able to very seriously review his approach and make changes, then absolutely, I would totally agree with that, because I think it's long overdue. And the players need to be able to stand up. And I suppose the irony being, Rob, that in most other walks of life, these things seem relatively straightforward and achievable. But Rangers have now got the chance to be able to do it, and they have to be able to try and just show that passion and that energy that we have been lacking.
Yeah, can't add anything to that, Cammy. That's exactly what needs to happen. We need the players to stand up. We need the manager to understand exactly what this means, and we need to win. Simple as that.
Well, folks, if you'd like to hear more from us, then please jump on over to our Patreon site, patreon.com/Heart and Hand. David will be back with you on the flagship on Monday to unpack a lot of this League Cup semi-final, and hopefully talking about us progressing through to the final, whomever we may be playing. The last thing for me to do is to thank our executive producers, Mike Lee, Paul Myers. Thank you all for listening, because I'm hoping that you share my opinion that it's been a fairly cathartic experience, and hopefully a balanced conversation. But my most important thanks. And listen, I know I say this after the end of every show that we've got to We've got to thank our guests for being able to come on. This is a tough gig when you have to come on and you want to try and look for some silver lining. It's sometimes very, very tough to find. But that is to say a huge thanks to my friend Rob Shorthouse for coming on. It's much appreciated, my friend. And irrespective of our distance, it's always a pleasure to be able to try and talk to you and get your thoughts.
Thank you, Cammy. Actually, strangely, I do feel a little bit better now that I've got all that off my chest, because I've been brooding all day, because I've been up since it was a 4 a.m. kickoff this morning, so it's been a long day to be. I didn't have the opportunity to go for a kip after the game. I've been straight up and straight to work, so this has been driving me mental all day. So it's been quite nice to get it off my chest, and always a pleasure to chat to you about.
It would be remiss of me not to give your manager show a shameless plug on here as well on our Patreon site. You guys have just covered the Murty era, and there is and forgive the phrasing, but there is a very important person about to come into the building.
Yeah, thank the Lord for that. It's been a tough old slog these past few managers. So looking forward to talking about Gerrard. So if anybody wants to check that out, then jump over to Patreon and join in the fun and get on the Gerrard Express.
Yeah, 100%. And the boys have done a great job covering all the way through from the Advocate era, and they go through game by game. It is something special in terms of that show as well. And Rob has done a magnificent job in contributing towards that as well. We will speak to you again on Monday, folks. Thanks everyone for listening, and have a great weekend. Speak soon. Bye-bye.